All right, listeners, buckle up, because today we are diving deep, deep into Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah, classic.
It's one of those books that seems to have just touched everyone who's read it, and we've got a whole stack of reviews and personal reflections on it.
Right.
People are just raving about how insightful it is. Now it's like changed their whole perspective on things,
Yeah, it's really resonated with a lot of people.
which honestly makes me wonder, what is it about this book, about Frankl's experiences at
Right.
Auschwitz,
Yeah.
that keeps people coming back to it decades later?
Yeah, it's not exactly a, light beach read.
Right.
But that's kind of the point, right? Frankl doesn't just tell you his story of survival, but he actually
Yeah.
uses that experience to grapple with the question we all face, which is,
Yeah.
what is the meaning of life, especially when life throws unimaginable suffering your way?
It's like he went through hell and came back with a guidebook, not just on surviving, but like finding something to live for, even in those, darkest of times.
Exactly. And the core of that guidebook is his concept of logotherapy.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Frankl believed that what truly drives us as humans
Yeah.
isn't the pursuit of, pleasure or power,
Mm-hmm.
but the will to meaning. That deep down need to find something that gives our lives purpose.
Okay, will to meaning.
Yeah.
I can already feel some listeners out there glazing over.
Right.
Break that down for us. What does that actually look like in real life?
Imagine you're in Frankl's shoes, imprisoned in a concentration camp.
Bro.
Everything has been stripped away. Your freedom, your possessions, your loved ones.
Yeah.
Logotherapy says that even in that situation, the human spirit is driven to find meaning, something to cling to, a reason to keep going. And
Right.
Frankl saw this firsthand. He observed that prisoners who held on to a sense of meaning, whether it was their love for their family, their faith,
Yeah.
or even just a small act of kindness they could offer another prisoner, they were more likely to survive.
Wow. So it's almost like having that sense of meaning gave them a reason to fight for their own survival.
Exactly. And it's not just about surviving extreme situations. Frankl believed this will to meaning
Right.
applies to all of us all the time.
Yeah.
We are constantly searching for something to make our lives feel meaningful.
And that makes sense. It explains why so many people connect with this book.
Yeah.
Even if we haven't, experienced anything close to the horrors of Auschwitz, we've all faced challenges, right?
Yeah.
Setbacks, times when life just feels meaningless.
Absolutely.
And Frankl offers us this idea that even in those moments, we have the power to choose our attitude and find a reason to keep going.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's like one reviewer said, this book isn't about avoiding suffering. It's about finding the strength to face it head on and discover meaning within it.
I love that. And that's where those 3 paths to meaning come in.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about those. I remember reading about them.
Yeah.
But a refresher never hurts.
All right, so picture this. You've got 3 doors in front of you,
Okay.
each leading to a different path to meaning.
Got it.
The first door is all about achievement. It's the path of creating something, contributing to a cause,
Right.
pouring your energy into work that you find fulfilling.
That sounds like the classic, find your passion advice, but in a,
Yeah.
way deeper, more existential way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, behind door number 2, you've got love and connection.
Okay.
Those deep, meaningful relationships that make life richer,
Mm-hmm.
romantic love, family, friendships, all those things that remind us we're not alone in this world.
Okay, that one's a no-brainer.
Right.
Humans are social creatures.
Yeah.
We need those connections.
Yeah.
But what about door number 3? That one always intrigued me the most.
Mm-hmm.
The path of finding meaning in suffering.
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
That's where it gets really interesting. And it's a big part of why Frankl's book resonated so deeply with readers. He's not saying that we should, go looking for suffering, right? But rather that when it inevitably shows up, we have a choice in how we respond to it.
Yeah.
We can let it break us,
Okay.
or we can find a way to make meaning out of it.
Do you remember that story about Frankl colleague who lost his wife?
Oh, yeah.
He was completely devastated, right?
Yeah.
Consumed by grief.
Right.
And Frankl helped him find meaning by shifting his perspective.
Yeah, he helped his colleague realize that because his wife had died first, she had been spared the pain of grieving him.
Wow.
It wasn't about denying the pain of the loss,
Right.
but rather finding a new way to understand it, a way that gave his life meaning even in the midst of his grief.
That's amazing how just changing your perspective can have such a profound impact.
Yeah.
It's like Frankl saying, hey, Life's going to throw you some curveballs, but you always have the power to choose how you're going to catch them.
Exactly. And speaking of powerful quotes, do you remember the one about the last of human freedoms?
Give me a second. I think I highlighted it. Yes. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.
Powerful.
Wow.
It really is, and it perfectly captures the essence of logotherapy.
Yeah.
Even when it feels like we have no control, we always have the power to choose our attitude.
Yeah.
And that choice, that act of choosing, can be a source of immense strength and meaning.
That's so true. I'm starting to see why this book has had such a lasting impact on people.
Yeah.
It's not just a history lesson. It's a guide to living a more meaningful life, no matter what challenges we face.
And that's why we were diving deep into it today.
Yes.
We're going to explore these ideas in more detail, unpack those 3 paths to meaning, and see how Frankl's insights can help us navigate the ups and downs of our own lives.
Okay, before we get too carried away, I think we need to take a step back and address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the existential vacuum in the room.
Ooh, good one. Yes, we definitely need to talk about that.
Because let's be real, even with all the comforts and conveniences of modern life, a lot of us still struggle with finding meaning and purpose.
Absolutely. Frankl called this the existential vacuum, that feeling of emptiness and lack of direction that can creep in even when we have everything we think we should want.
It's like that saying, you can be rich and successful and still feel completely lost.
Exactly. And in part 2 of our deep dive, we're going to explore this existential vacuum in more detail, see how it manifests in modern life, and more importantly, how we can use Frankl's insights to overcome it. Welcome back to our deep dive into man's search for meaning. Before we got sidetracked by that existential vacuum, we were talking about those 3 paths to meaning that
Right.
Frankl lays out:
Yeah.
achievement, love, and finding meaning in suffering.
Right, and I think a lot of people, get tripped up on that third path.
Yeah.
It's hard to wrap your head around the idea that suffering could actually lead to meaning.
It's definitely counterintuitive, especially in a culture that's, obsessed with happiness and
Right.
avoiding pain at all costs.
Yeah.
But Frankl argues that suffering is an inevitable part of life.
Right.
It's how we respond to that suffering that determines whether it breaks us or makes us stronger.
One of the reviews I was reading mentioned this idea of the meaning triangle.
Okay.
They said Frankl believed that we can find meaning through creative work,
Okay.
loving relationships, and by choosing our attitude when faced with unavoidable suffering.
Right.
It's like these 3 points form a triangle,
Yeah.
and each one supports the others.
That's a great analogy
Yeah.
because it highlights the fact that these paths aren't, mutually exclusive.
Right.
They can all work together to create a more meaningful life.
Right.
You might find purpose in your work,
Yeah.
which gives you the strength to face a personal challenge
Okay.
with a more positive attitude.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's your love for your family that helps you find meaning in caring for a sick loved one.
It's like a support system for your soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, this idea of choosing our attitude, even in the face of suffering,
Right.
ties into one of the most powerful concepts in the book,
Okay.
the delusion of reprieve.
Ooh, yes. That's the one I wanted to dig into a little bit more.
Yeah.
It sounds almost like a defense mechanism.
It can be.
Okay.
Frankl observed this phenomenon among his fellow prisoners in Auschwitz. Imagine you're in that situation facing unimaginable hardship.
Okay.
The delusion of reprieve is this false hope that
Gotcha.
creeps in, the belief that despite all evidence to the contrary,
Right.
things are somehow going to magically get better.
So it's like clinging to like a sliver of hope, even when the reality is bleak.
Yes, and while hope can be a powerful motivator, Frankl saw that in some cases, this delusion of reprieve
Yeah.
could actually be harmful.
How so?
Because when those hopes were inevitably dashed, it could lead to a complete loss of spirit.
Right.
Imagine building yourself up, believing you'll be reunited with your loved ones,
Right.
only to find out they're gone.
Oh, wow.
The disappointment can be crushing.
It's like the fall is even harder because you climbed so high on false hope.
Precisely. And that's where Frankl's emphasis on choosing your attitude comes in again.
Right.
He's not saying we shouldn't have hope,
Okay.
but rather that we need to cultivate a sense of realistic optimism.
So it's about finding that balance between hope and
Yeah.
acceptance.
Yes.
Accepting the reality of our situation while still holding on to a belief that we can find meaning within it.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting because it forces us to ask ourselves, what does realistic optimism look like
Right.
in the face of hardship? How can we cultivate that kind of resilient mindset?
I'm thinking back to what we discussed earlier about the existential vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that one of the reasons people feel so lost and meaningless
Yeah.
is because, our culture is obsessed with happiness and chasing pleasure.
Right.
But what if we're going about it all wrong?
Okay.
What if instead of chasing happiness, we focused on finding meaning?
That's a really profound question.
Yeah.
And I think Frankl would agree with you.
Right.
He believed that happiness is a byproduct of meaning, not the other way around.
Okay.
When we make meaning our primary focus, happiness naturally follows.
It's like that saying, happiness is a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it eludes you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it comes and sits softly on your shoulder.
I love that analogy, and
Yeah.
it perfectly illustrates the difference between chasing fleeting pleasure
Right.
and building a life filled with purpose and meaning.
So how do we shift our focus from chasing happiness
Mhm.
to pursuing meaning? Is it just a matter of willpower?
It's more about aligning your actions with your values.
Right.
Frankl would say it's about recognizing that life is constantly questioning us, and our responsibility is to respond by living a life that reflects what we believe in.
It's like we're having a conversation with existence itself.
Yes.
And our choices are our words in that dialogue.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And those choices, those actions,
Yeah.
are how we create meaning. It's not something that's just given to us. We
Uh,
have to actively seek it out.
That reminds me of one of the reviews
Yeah.
that talked about the importance of responsibility.
Right.
The reviewer said, Frankl believed that we are each responsible for creating meaning in our own lives.
Absolutely.
It's not something that's just handed to us on a silver platter.
And, I think that's one of the most empowering aspects of logotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds us that even when things feel out of control,
Yeah.
we still have the power to choose our attitude, to find meaning in our experiences,
Yeah.
and to shape the narrative of our own lives.
It's like we're the authors of our own stories. And even though we can't control all the plot twists,
Yeah.
we can choose how our characters respond to them.
Exactly. And that choice, that act of choosing meaning, is what makes us truly human.
Okay, this has been a truly thought-provoking conversation so far,
Yeah.
but I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more to explore in Frankl's work.
Absolutely.
But before we get too carried away,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time to address some of the criticisms
Okay.
that have been leveled at logotherapy because, let's be real, no philosophy is perfect, right?
You're absolutely right. And it's important to acknowledge the potential limitations and alternative perspectives.
Yeah.
In the final part of our deep dive,
Right.
we'll delve into some of the critiques of logotherapy and see how they hold up in light of Frankl's ideas.
Right?
We'll also explore some practical takeaways that you can apply to your own life,
Perfect.
so you can start putting these powerful concepts into action.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of man's search for meaning today. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like really inspired right now.
Yeah, me too.
We've covered so much ground, the will to meaning,
Yeah.
the existential vacuum, those three paths to meaning,
Mm-hmm.
all born from Frankl's experiences in Auschwitz. It's heavy stuff,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. It really makes you think differently about, the challenges that we face in our own lives.
For sure. But before we wrap up, I think it's only fair to address some of the criticisms of logotherapy because, no matter how powerful an idea is, there are always going to be different perspectives.
Absolutely. And engaging with those criticisms
Yeah.
can actually help us understand Frankl's ideas even better.
Totally. One critique I came across is that logotherapy can be a bit too individualistic.
Okay.
It puts all the responsibility for finding meaning on the individual
Yeah.
without considering how societal factors might play a role.
That's a valid point. It's important to remember that Frankl was writing from his own experience. Right.
And that experience was shaped by the extreme circumstances of the concentration camp.
Yeah.
It makes sense that he would emphasize, personal choice and responsibility in that context.
Because even in that, horrific situation,
Right.
he saw that people still had the power to choose their attitude.
Exactly. But when we apply logotherapy to, the complexities of modern life,
Right.
we have to acknowledge that societal structures
Yep.
inequalities, cultural norms, like all these things
Yeah.
can have a huge impact on an individual's ability to find meaning.
So it's not always as simple as like just
Right.
choosing to have a positive attitude.
Yeah.
Sometimes the barriers to meaning are external.
Absolutely. And in those cases, collective action might be necessary
Yeah.
to create a society where everyone has a fair chance to find meaning and purpose.
Makes sense. Another critique I saw was that logotherapy can sometimes come across as overly optimistic,
Okay.
almost like it's minimizing the reality of suffering.
I could see how people might get that impression.
Yeah.
After all, Frankl's talking about finding meaning in suffering,
Right,
even
right.
in the horrors of a concentration camp.
Right.
But I don't think he's trying to, downplay the pain
Yeah.
or suggest that we should all just like grin and bear it.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that even in the darkest of times,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a spark of human freedom, a choice in how we respond.
It's about acknowledging the suffering, like honoring the pain, but not letting it define us.
Exactly. Finding meaning in suffering doesn't mean denying the negative.
Right.
It means finding a way to hold both the positive and the negative,
Mm-hmm.
the light and the shadow,
Yeah.
in a way that allows us to keep moving forward.
He called this tragic optimism, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that life is full of both joy and sorrow,
Mhm.
and that our task is to find meaning in both.
Perfectly put, and that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
One that continues to resonate with readers today.
This deep dive has honestly, changed my perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah. It's reminded me that even when life feels like chaotic and meaningless,
Right.
we always have a choice.
Yes.
We can choose our attitude.
Yeah.
We can choose to search for meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And we can choose to create a life that, reflects our values.
And that's ultimately what man's search for meaning is all about.
Yeah.
It's a call to action and an invitation to step into our own lives with intention and purpose, even when things are tough.
It's like Frankl saying, hey, life's going to throw you some curveballs.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful and messy and heartbreaking and joyful all at the same time. But you get to choose how you show up for it.
Right.
You get to choose what it means to you.
And that, my friend, is the essence of logotherapy. And that's what makes this book so powerful and enduring.
Yes.
It's a message of hope and resilience that transcends time and circumstance.
So for anyone listening who's feeling lost or searching for meaning, remember Frankl's message. You are not alone. And even in the darkest of times, you still have the power to choose your attitude, to find meaning in your experiences, and to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into man's search for meaning. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration.
Yes.
And that it sparks some new insights and inspiration for your own journey.
Thanks for joining.